Good evening, thanks for joining us. This is NTD Business, and I'm Paul Graney. Ever hear people joke about a tax on breathing? It's silly, right? How about a tax on moving? The White House floats a mileage tax. The ship in the Suez Canal is still stuck and is driving up oil prices and shipping costs. How much will it cost global trade? And Argentina says it's going to default on its debt to the IMF again. Why are US taxpayers on the hook? Argentina's president says they just don't have the money. That and much more coming up at NTD Business. If you're a struggling small business owner, the government has a helping hand for you. The Paycheck protection program for covering employee wages during the pandemic is extended for 2 more months. You now have until the end of May to get your application in. Technically, it's a loan, but it can be forgiven if you spend at least 60% on payroll. The bill now goes to President Biden to be signed into law. The SBA has made nearly $196 billion in paycheck protection loans since the beginning of the year. But the program has been targeted by fraudsters. One guy in Texas just got busted buying luxury cars and new homes with $17 million he stole. Scammers have apparently taken billions from another program set up to help small businesses. New analysis shows the Small Business Association might have given out $79 billion in fraudulent small business loans. Applicants borrowed the money from the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. That's supposed to help small business owners, nonprofits, and farmers. But the analysis says the SBA sent its Office of Inspector General over 1 million referrals for possible fraud. U.S. consumer spending fell by the most in 10 months in February as that boost from January stimulus checks faded. But don't worry, some say the decline may just be temporary. There's more stimulus on the way. Fred Katamai reports.
The harsh winter storms and bitter cold in February caused consumer spending to drop by the most in 10 months. American households cut spending by 1% last month. That was steeper than economists had forecast. It marked the largest decline since April 2020, when businesses shut down at the start of the health crisis. Also contributing to the drop, the boost from a second round of stimulus checks had faded. Americans also had less to put into their wallets. Personal income tumbled 7.1% last month following a surge in January. As a result, consumers spent less across the board, but look for consumption to rebound this month. Warmer weather, a new round of stimulus checks, and increased vaccinations will likely unleash pent-up demand.
We have far more fiscal stimulus than we had during the global financial crisis. We have Fed support, extraordinary monetary policy support. And of course, we have in the offing the broad distribution of vaccines.
Economists expect growth to accelerate. They see the economy expanding by as much as 7.5% this quarter, and possibly topping 7% for the year. That would be the fastest annual rate since 1984.
Some say generous unemployment benefits are actually discouraging people from going back to work. Also, some states weren't pushing people to find work during the pandemic. But now South Carolina is encouraging unemployed people to find jobs again. Wants people applying for jobless benefits to actually prove they're actively looking for a job. The state added 18,000 jobs last month.
South Carolina will soon require people to prove they're actively looking for a job if they want to keep getting unemployment benefits. The state's Department of Employment and Workforce said Friday, starting April 18th, if someone wants to keep receiving jobless benefits, they need to complete 2 job searches every week through the state's portal. The agency suspended the requirement at the start of the pandemic, but now, a year later, agency director Dan Elzy says the unemployment rate is steadily declining, and the economic recovery is strong, so it's time to reinstate the requirement. South Carolina employers are trying to fill 87,000 open positions. At the same time, 125,000 people are drawing unemployment benefits each week. South Carolina is among 27 states that had lower unemployment than the national average in February, which was 6.2%. South Dakota and Utah had the lowest rates at 2.9% and 3% respectively, while Hawaii and New York had the highest numbers at 9.2 and 8.9%.
It's tax season, and the White House is planning more taxes for you. The Transport Secretary Pete Buttigieg wants to tax you for every mile you travel. It's like a tax on moving. Well, they're calling it a mileage tax. Here's Secretary Buttigieg talking to CNBC.
What about a mileage-based tax?
So I think that shows a lot of promise. If we believe in that so-called user pays principle, the idea that part of how we pay for roads is you pay based on how much you drive, the gas tax used to be the obvious way to do it. It's not anymore. So a so-called vehicle miles traveled tax or mileage tax, whatever you want to call it, could be a way to do it.
Buttigieg says a tax on miles driven makes more sense than a gas tax because more vehicles use less gas or even no gas. Biden plans to reveal at least part of his infrastructure package next week. Buttigieg says he's getting feedback there needs to be sustainable ways of funding the multi-trillion-dollar plan. Republicans worry the package will be full of Democrat pet projects that really have nothing to do with infrastructure. Next week, President Biden will travel to Pittsburgh to unveil that multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure plan. He signaled before that he would pay for the package by repealing the Trump tax cut for high earners. When you think of lobbying in Washington, what springs to mind? Big pharma, oil, tobacco? Well, big tech is now America's biggest corporate lobbyists. Facebook and Amazon, at least, are at the very top. Last year, they spent nearly twice as much as big oil and big tobacco. NTD's Patrick Hayden reports.
A Public Citizen report says big tech spent $124 million in lobbying and campaign contributions during the 2020 election cycle. That's bigger than any other year. Amazon and Facebook were the biggest of all company contributors, with a combined total of more than $38 million, roughly half each. From 2018 to 2020, Amazon's spending increased by 30% and Facebook's increased by a whopping 56%. Big tech companies also recruited 40 more lobbyists in that time. And 94% of lawmakers who oversee privacy or antitrust issues receive money from a big tech political action group or lobbyist. The report concludes that Amazon and Facebook's increased spending reflects the compounding challenges they face in Washington. It also says that big tech has amassed extraordinary wealth and power due to a broken political system that works for corporations and not the people of the country. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
Very big tech. Wall Street surged in the last half hour of trading today. S&P 500 returned to record high. The Dow rose 453 points, 1.39%. S&P 500 gained 65 points, or 1.66%. The Nasdaq added 161 points, around 1.2%. Technology, healthcare, financial stocks all providing a lift to the S&P 500 and the Dow. The dollar eased a little today, but remained near those 4-month highs. 10-year Treasury yield rose a little, 1.66%, still lower than that spike we saw last week. Argentina says it's going to default on its debt again. Don't think it has nothing to do with you. The U.S. taxpayer is on the hook for a lot of it. Don't ask me why. Argentina's president says they just don't have the money to pay its $45 billion debt to the International Monetary Fund. They just don't have the money. They're not saying they're not going to pay the debt, they just don't have the money to pay it. So they want to negotiate better terms with the IMF. Fergus Hodgson is the founder of Econ Americas. It's an economic intelligence firm with a special interest in South America. He tells me Argentina just restructured their debt last year. So I asked Hodgson, they obviously didn't follow the new terms, did they?
Well, yes and no. Actually, the previous administration, Mauricio Macri, did make some reforms. So, for example, he did away with the fixed exchange rate. When I first went there on a visit in 2015, there was a fixed exchange rate and a thriving black market, the blue dollar they called it. And so Macri did get rid of some of those. There were other price controls. There was more transparency regarding the rate of inflation. So there were some reforms, but unfortunately, the populism of Argentina actually brought back the Cristina Kirchner, so the former first lady of Argentina, got back into power. Her husband has passed away now. And so she reverted back to the old ways. And so as soon as she got into power, actually, she joked about how during a downturn, you want to invest more or spend more. And so the writing was basically on the wall.
Yeah, kind of similar to what we're looking at here, unfortunately. And the IMF kind of traditionally, they don't really like people defaulting. They don't really like countries defaulting on their debt. They prefer to lend more, new debt to cover the old debt. Are we just going to see the same thing here?
Yes and no. The problem is that some of the debt that Argentina holds is with what they like to call vulture funds that go after distressed debts and like to fight it out in court. So what Argentina would like to do is basically renegotiate the debts and get better terms. But the vulture funds will basically say, no thanks, we'll take you to court and make you pay. And so they will make it more difficult to roll the debt over and get away from upfront payments, which in my view is actually necessary. Argentina needs some tough love to say, pay it up now, make the reforms, enough is enough.
Is this a new thing, these vulture funds? I've never heard these people play a part in these negotiations before.
No, not with the IMF directly, but basically during the previous, Mauricio Macri was in, I think, for 3 or 4 years, but prior to that, the vulture funds had bought much of Argentina's debt. And so there was some tension because Argentina was trying to renegotiate that during the Kirchner regime, and then that debt got carried forward through the Macri administration. And those vulture funds are still around, basically. They still hold some of Argentina's debt. And what happens is that they will take Argentina to court and say, you cannot pay anyone else until you pay us first. Do you follow what I mean? So there'll be a long-term legal battle, and they'll say, you can't just stiff us and make other deals with other people. We'll take you to court in New York. And what happens is actually, you might think Argentina could get away with it, but the banking system will say, no, we're going to comply with the legal orders from, let's say, U.S. district courts.
Wow, interesting. Never knew. And on the IMF debt, the debt that they might like to roll over, I believe that a lot of this cost falls on the U.S. taxpayer somehow. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah, so Paul, that's right. There's a very long story to the IMF, but it is the fact that the U.S. has twice or almost 3 times as much of the debt in the IMF, owns it relative to any other country. I think Japan is second at about 6%, and the U.S. is around 18%. And so this debt is held by U.S. taxpayers, and it seems like the reason the U.S. holds this through the Treasury is that they want to have the most sway in the organization, so that if there are major decisions, they have almost near veto power over those decisions. I'm not saying I encourage this. I would rather the IMF go away, to be frank, that it's a holdover from a bygone era. But it is the case the U.S. is by far the greatest debt holder in the IMF, greater than any other country. I think 3 times as much as Japan or Germany. Those two are next in line. And so when this debt expands, naturally, it proportionally expands more on the United States. And right now it's about $200 billion.
Incredible. As if they didn't have enough to worry about here. Fergus, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
The big ship is still stuck. The Suez Canal blockage is driving up the price of oil and shipping. But 12% of global trade goes through the canal, but they say it could be blocked for weeks. Insurance company Allianz says the blockage could cost global trade $6 to $10 billion a week. Moody's says European manufacturers and car part suppliers could be most affected because they don't stock up on supplies. Kira Lee reports.
The blockage in the Suez Canal has sent the cost of shipping cargo soaring. Rates for oil product tankers have nearly doubled this week. Vessels were diverted away from the vital waterway as a giant container ship remained wedged between both banks. The 400-metre-long Ever Given has been stuck since Tuesday. Efforts are underway to free the vessel, although the process may take weeks.
So they'll start trying to offload water, ballast, oil, fuel. They'll bring some dredging equipment in. Again, they have to be very careful about this. The vessel is hung up on the banks. The bow is basically in Asia, the stern's in Africa, and the middle is in the middle of the canal. And what you can't do is take a lot of weight off the ends and put a lot of what they call a sagging stress on the vessel. You can conceivably crack the hull, cause an oil spill, but worse, catastrophically fracture the vessel in half.
Rerouting ships around southern Africa could pile about 2 more weeks onto journeys and mean more than 800 tonnes of extra fuel consumption for some tankers. Fuel is a ship's single biggest cost, representing up to 60% of operating expenses. More than 30 tankers have been waiting at either side of the canal to pass through, shipping data on Refinitiv showed.
Big problem, but some people are even poking fun at the crisis. Someone even created a new website. It's called istheshipstillstuck.com. Check it out. Before the pandemic, when everything was all systems go, did you ever rent shared office space when you went to a new city? WeWork is a big player in the space, buildings in the world's biggest cities. It tried to go public in 2019 at the height of its business, but that fell through. Its founder and former CEO Adam Neumann is a pretty eccentric guy. But it looks like WeWork is going to get another shot at public life through a very trendy special purpose acquisition company, or SPAC.
2 years after its infamous failed IPO, WeWork is taking another shot at going public. And this time, it will take a more unconventional approach through a SPAC. First, a shell company will be listed on the stock market, and then it will acquire WeWork. It's a funny arrangement because investors buy a stake in the shell company before they know which company it will acquire. So will they be happy owning WeWork during a pandemic?
Any economic disruption where people are not leasing or there's unemployment goes up or anything like that can really impact their business model.
WeWork was valued at $47 billion before its 2019 IPO, but now some analysts think it's only worth $9 billion. WeWork leases prime office space in the world's biggest cities and then rents the space to other companies or individuals. But rental length is usually far shorter than the lease period.
It's a very risky model. It works great if you have full occupancy. You're entering into 10-year leases, let's say, for example, so you're on the hook for 10 years.
This time, Insight Partners, Starwood Capital Group, Fidelity Management, BowX Capital Management, and others are providing the funds. But not everyone is convinced by the timing.
Yeah, and I'm scratching my head, and so are many people. I think the bet here is that the economy will improve. People will go back to the old ways of life.
2020 and 2021 have seen a record number of SPAC listings, but few have performed well.
If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. The FBI says a popular Instagrammer duped millions of dollars from his followers. He promised to pay above market value for their Bitcoin, but the money never arrived. NTD's Phil Zoe has the story.
The FBI is investigating an Instagram user known as Jay Manzini. According to court documents, Manzini stole at least $2.5 million from his victims. He would show fake receipts of wire transfers, tricking his followers to send over Bitcoin. Except in most cases, the wire transfers never arrived. Manzini had over 1 million followers on social media. Allegedly, he would tell people he maxed out his buying limit on crypto exchanges and was willing to pay up to a 5% premium for Bitcoin.
Bitcoin attracts a lot of people who think that there must be some trick to get rich for free because times are tough, people are worried. They don't see a way out. They think this could be their lottery ticket.
Crypto tracker Whale Alert says $18 million have been sent to scam accounts so far this year, and the number will continue rising.
This works in crypto because transactions are irreversible, so it's almost impossible to pull your money back.
In one case, Manzini showed a wire transfer receipt of over $3 million to a falling victim. The FBI said Manzini only had less than $200 in his bank account at the time.
There is no free money. There's no magical one weird trick. Work for your money. You're not going to get it from Bitcoins or crypto scams.
Manzini's Instagram account has been deleted. He faces up to 20 years in prison for wire fraud charges. Phil Zoe, NTD News.
Computer chip chaos continues. Now, the Chinese electric vehicle maker NIO is halting production on Friday as that global semiconductor chip shortage heats up. NIO dominates the EV market in China. Some call it China's Tesla. I wonder what they call Tesla there then. NIO says it'll halt production for 5 days at one of its plants, so 1,000 fewer vehicles will be delivered as a result. Chip shortages have cost the global auto industry big, altogether 130,000 vehicles in lost production, according to research firm Auto Forecast Solutions. North America accounts for the most of the units lost. Back in the West, Volkswagen says it's seeking damages from its former CEO and Audi's former boss. It's over the diesel emissions scandal, Dieselgate. Kira Lee reports.
Volkswagen has unveiled its latest electric car. The ID.4 SUV was showcased outside its factory in Dresden on Friday. But as the industry continues its drive to go green, VW is still feeling the fallout from its emissions scandal. Friday saw the firm announce it was seeking damages from former chief executive Martin Winterkorn over the so-called Dieselgate. Former Audi boss Rupert Stadler is also named. The German group said on Friday that following a far-reaching legal investigation, it had concluded that Winterkorn and Stadler had breached their duty of care, adding it had found no violations by other members of the management board. Winterkorn and Stadler have both denied being responsible for the scandal. Volkswagen admitted in 2015 to using illegal software to rig diesel engine tests in the United States, sparking the biggest crisis in its history. The scandal has cost it more than $38 billion in fines, refits and legal costs. Winterkorn's lawyers said in a statement that the former CEO regretted the supervisory board's decision and rejected the accusations against him. Stadler's lawyers declined to comment.
Still to come, the tax watchdog says your refund might be delayed this year. The IRS is playing catch-up from a huge backlog. And a historic German brewery finds a way to save its unsold beer that was about to go down the drain, joining forces with local bakers. That and more after the break.
If you're like me, and I think it's actually most of us, then you're getting really fed up with the nonsense going on inside the banking system. I mean, we've worked hard our entire lives to retire comfortably. We just recovered from the crash of 2008, and it seems like it's about to happen all over again. Look at the too-big-to-fail banks. They're only getting bigger as the Fed hands them trillions of dollars daily, while simple folks like you and me, we're only getting the short end of the stick. That's why I'm glad I found this book called The Bank Failure Survival Guide. Give us a call, and we'll send you a free copy with no obligations whatsoever. Just one American to another, telling you about some options that you might not have considered. Call 866-239-2619 today for your free copy of The Bank Failure Survival Guide. That's 866-239-2619.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled, and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Might take a while before you see your tax refund. A watchdog says that a significant backlog remains from last year and the IRS is trying to play catch-up. 2 sets of pandemic relief checks from stimulus bills passed last year also haven't been fully sent out. Another obstacle is a mountain of rejected tax returns. Tax Watchdog says that by the end of January, the IRS had nearly 1.6 million rejected forms that it needed to handle. One IRS official told CNBC he encourages filers to use electronic returns to avoid further backlogs. And Norway will soon build the world's first full-scale ship tunnel. The government has now approved funds for the giant engineering project. It's known as the Stad Ship Tunnel. It'll be about 1 mile long, stretching under the Norwegian mountains. It allows ships to avoid part of Norway's most dangerous shipping zone. The tunnel itself will be 108 feet high, 118 feet wide, and allows ships of up to 16,000 tons to go through. Estimates put the project cost at about $350 million. It'll take about 4 years to complete. Beer makers in Germany face a tough choice: what to do with all their unsold beer that's about to expire. One brewery has found a solution by teaming up with local bakers. NTD's Evelyn Lee reports.
With restaurants and bars all closed due to pandemic restrictions, an historic German brewery is teaming up with local bakers. They're using its unsold beer to make bread. Nearly 1,600 gallons are close to the expiration date.
And that is now divided among local bakers. And now they make the alt beer bread ring.
Local bakers already use the leftover grains from the brewing process to produce hearty loaves of bread called Treberbrot. About a dozen bakeries are taking part, and they're offering a free bottle of beer from the brewery with each loaf.
Frixen also gets something from it, again on the reverse way basically, and also sells bottles, which is important for the breweries at the moment.
Beer sales in Germany have been hurt by lockdown measures. Restaurants and bars have been closed since November, except for takeout. That's a problem particularly for Germany's many small brewers like Füchschen. And customers are happy to support them.
It's a great campaign. Solidarity with one another is more important now than it has ever been.
The brewery CEO says the best thing about the deal with local bakers is they saved the beer, and it doesn't have to go down the drain. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
Save the beer. And that's the latest business updates for this week, in fact. You can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. But for NTD Business, that's all for this week. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.